there was this guy who's like, well, government agencies, they get tax breaks for hiring minorities. It's like, what are you talking about?
What?
No, they get
Wait,
tax
what?
breaks for no, no. Government agencies
No,
don't pay taxes.
they don't
No,
pay
no, they
tax.
do. They get tax breaks. That's how it works. It's like and Sam Cedar just like looks to camera and it's just like, how do I don't know what to say to that. Like you're just
Yeah.
and anyway, he's been talking about it on the Majority Report lately. It's like, all the
They
like
get tax.
different people.
What?
And I watched like Tim Pool last night. I
What the
watched,
fuck?
yeah, no, it really is. It
How do you
really,
how
yeah,
do you how do
how,
you think anything works?
yeah.
What are you talking about?
That's not how that works. That's not how anything works. Yeah, no, exactly. It's no, they
Oh
get
my
tax breaks. So
God.
how do you think they don't pay taxes? They're
You
funded by
think the
tax
government
dollars.
pays
Yeah,
tax to the government?
yeah,
What?
yeah. No,
My God,
it's
the Internal Revenue Service's tax bill must be huge because the amount of money they take in.
oh my God.
We're back. It's an episode of I Don't Speak German. I don't really know what kind of episode it is. I don't know whether it's going to be mainline or news brief or any one of the other overcomplicated categories that we've been evolving. It's just an episode. We'll find out what we'll find out. And but the main thing is that it's here. You're listening to it, and I'm here. But really, the most important thing is that Daniel Harper's here. At least I hope he is. Daniel, unless I've been hallucinating the build up to this. Daniel, are you there?
Well, there's no way I can like verify for you that you have not been hallucinating, but on my
It's
end,
true.
at least at most one of us is hallucinating. Actually, we both might be hallucinating. It's possible, but we are
Independently.
apparently
Yeah.
communicating clearly. So I think we have to make the assumption that we are not. And the audience can tell us if this comes out coherent or not, I guess.
That's true. That's true. The audience will be able to give us independent verification. So thank God for the audience. And yeah, we are
The long
still here.
suffering, the long suffering
The long,
audience.
the long suffering, long waiting, very patient, I hope, audience who are back
Yes.
after all this time. I hope. Daniel, how have you been? If you
Uh,
want to talk about that.
I mean, things are. I put this on Blue Sky and I put this on my Patreon or whatever, but I did break my ankle at the end of January, and so I've been out of work for a little while because I work retail and can't walk. So it's one of those things. And things are getting better. I have a follow up appointment in about a week from the time of recording, and hopefully I will be able to return to work shortly. I've been applying for new jobs, and so things have been both up and down for me. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank all the people who have helped me support myself on Patreon, because otherwise I would have had like no income whatsoever and would not been able to pay any of my bills. But anyway, so that's how I've been. And believe me, during this process, I have still been listening to podcasts and doing the research, doing all the work. But I haven't been able to record for just reasons of pain. And just drug addledness. But we're back. We're coming back for sure.
Whereas I have also had the drug addledness, but without any of the excuse of having broken any parts of my body. So yeah, here we are with, I believe, to kick us off before we get into a sort of general chat about the second Trump administration so far. We have, I believe, some Cantwell and maybe even the last ever Cantwell news. Is that correct?
I mean, I doubt this will be the last ever Cantwell news, but it is Cantwell news, and everybody loves the Cantwell news. And this is a couple of weeks old at this point, but we might as well cover it, just in case people didn't see it, and at least we can kind of give our 2 cents on it. So since our most recent like kind of full 9 guest numbered episode, which was a Cantwell episode, um, he the fact that he was going on Grinder and talking to gay men and really did not go over well within the Nazi community, as you can understand. And
Really, I can't imagine why not.
yeah, no, yeah, and like
What
it's the thing is,
about that? that gave them pause.
The thing is that, like, he was doing it for like the worst possible reasons, and like these people have no understanding of, like, he is just like, you're going on Grinder and talking to gay, like, when you're talking to like trans people and shit, like it was literally like, like it's just the most, like, they're just a bunch of emotional 12-year-old boys who, like, have grown up and they want to commit genocide, and it's just it's one of those, like,
it says, it tells you
sometimes
everything
it's
you need
not
to know.
sometimes it's not any deeper than that. Sorry, go ahead.
They're not. It tells you everything that they're not able to keep up with the subtleties of Chris Cantwell.
Chris Cantwell, exactly. No, I agree. I mean, Cantwell is on his own plane, and I think that's what makes him so entertaining, regardless. Is that he is just he's got his own little, like, psychology thing going on. And so anyway, as his audience continued to dwindle, he spent less and less effort doing his podcast. And I'm not going to complain as someone who has taken breaks from this podcast over the time, but we try to, like, make an entertaining show, and we, like, try to only come in when we have something to say. Whereas Cantwell, used to have a thing of, like, I'm going to do like 3 2-hour episodes a week, like, and take live callers, and he thinks of himself as this brilliant radio professional, et cetera, et cetera. Well, as his listenership dropped and as the donations stopped coming in, he started giving less and less of a shit about doing his podcast. He would take, like, shorter episodes. He would take days off. He was doing, like, I think he was still doing, like, the members only show, but he was definitely, like, really phoning it in for the last, like, 6 months or so. And then it was either right before or right after the inauguration, the Trump's inauguration. He's like, he kind of did his last show, and he didn't announce it was his last show. He just stopped doing episodes, and put up on his Telegram channel, something to the effect of, after a couple of weeks, it's like, I'm not gone, I'm coming back. I'm coming back better than ever. And he had talked about, I've got some new ideas about how to rebrand myself, about how to, kind of make a new show that's gonna, get people back involved, and that sort of thing. But basically it was radio silence. And, I've always been on the philosophy of, once these people stop podcasting, you're not my problem anymore. Like, please, Chris, keep me out of my misery. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
stay off the radar. Everybody's happy.
Stay off the radio, stay off the podcast, and I don't have to pay attention to you anymore. At least it makes me happy. Like, I would donate to you to keep you off the radio, honestly. Like, I would not actually do that, but, like, you get where I'm coming from. And then just a couple of weeks ago, he ends up in legal filing. He's in some legal shenanigans. And we don't really know the details yet. It seems a little bit vague, but apparently he's been charged with misdemeanor accounts and a felony account of strangulation. And I think initially it was thought, like, maybe it was because it's at the halfway house where he was living, where he's been living since he was released from prison. And so it was like, well, maybe it's a domestic dispute, maybe it's like a partner of his, but it seems more likely that it was, at least, from what I know about Cantwell, it seems more likely that it's someone that was bothering him, like, in the halfway house, and he,
right.
Like, again, we don't know the details, unless and until this goes to trial, or unless until we get more details, we're not going to know anything. But yeah, Cantwell was apparently strangling someone, and normally I would not just take the cops to their word, but also, like, this is Cantwell, so
this is Cantwell. Yeah,
this is Cantwell. I trust, as little as I trust the cops, I trust the cops more than Cantwell. Like, that's it's just the reality of it. So anyway, there's an article at the Independent that will surely be in the show notes that you can go and read. But he gave an interview to the Independent, and he's like, he goes, I didn't strangle anyone, he argued. People who are trying to cause legal problems for other people know that they can escalate a misdemeanor to a felony by saying strangulation occurred. And so it's just the same old bullshit. Like, if you remember his, like, felony conviction back in 2021, he was, it's like, I didn't extort anything from this guy. I was just, it was just like locker room talk effectively. That's kind of his argument. It's like, it's just, what you do to get somebody to leave you alone. And he just thinks of himself as a tough guy. And so he's just like, no, I didn't strangle that person. I merely had my hand around his neck. It was, I don't know. That's not, he doesn't say that in that many words, but, he's like, this is New Hampshire, not North Korea, and I have every right to physically remove someone from my home when they refuse to leave upon being ordered to do so. He said the person refused multiple verbal commands to leave while raising his voice to disturb neighbors and escalate the conflict. I used the absolute minimum amount of force that I could remove a trespasser who physically resisted my attempts to remove him. And I'm telling you, even reading those words, I'm like, I know I can hear that in Cantwell's voice. I have listened to so many hours of Cantwell. It is so like that is, this is exactly what he said. I promise you, this is Cantwell 100%. So we don't know the details.
It's kind of written in copies as well, isn't it? It's written in cop lingo.
Well, it's like this kind of libertarian language is kind of how I think of it, because he's like, he refused multiple verbal commands to leave while raising his voice to disturb neighbors, right, and escalate the conflict. Yeah. It's like he like I was aggressed upon, and therefore I get to respond.
He violated the non-aggression principle.
He violated the non-aggression principle. Exactly.
And then he proceeded to the vehicle, and
exactly. And every time Chris Cantwell gets in trouble, he uses this same kind of logic, and like it really is like. And I don't know the situation, but like, look, somebody was like hassling your girlfriend, somebody was hassling you, somebody, who knows? I don't know. But that doesn't mean you get to like, you don't, and this is like the libertarian logic, right? Is like, somebody stubs my toe, I get to pull out my pistol and shoot him in the face because he aggressed, the non-aggression principle, et cetera, he aggressed upon me, and therefore, it's his fault, whatever happens to him, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the logic by which this man, like, he truly lives his life by this logic. And at least that's how he justifies himself after the fact. But, I've seen video of the almost shooting incident he got into many years ago. And like, it seems like this is just the logic that he goes by. And I don't know, it's just one of those, I don't know. There's a line that I read in like a true crime book about like, the prison system, like one of these trashy like paperbacks that I read, like I read it in like 2002 or something. It was probably from the late 80s or something. And it was about like, people who are in like, in supermax prisons or whatever. And it's a line from like a prison guard. And it's like, some guys are on a life sentence. They're just doing in installments. And that's kind of how I feel about Chris Cantwell at this point. He's really doing a life sentence. He's just doing it in installments. He gets out for a while. He keeps his nose clean for a while, and then he's going to get himself back in trouble because he doesn't know how not to. And it's almost sad. Like, again, I actually don't wish the horribleness of the American prison system even on Christopher Cantwell.
No, I agree. Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where like, if maybe there was better social support, if maybe there was like a way of like reaching out to Chris Cantwell, although Chris Cantwell is like, he's so in his own head at this point that I don't know he can be reached at this point, so no, it's anyway, again, we don't know the details. We don't know really what went on. Solidarity to the victim, if that's a thing that, matters in this situation. We really don't know what was going on. It could have been another Nazi buddy of his or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, we really do not know anything about this, and so I'm not going to like speculate. But, that's Cantwell. He's probably going to go back to trial at some point. I don't know. So Molly Conger of Weird Little Guys, which is one of the best podcasts you're ever going to listen to. If you don't know about Weird Little Guys at this point, you probably have not been listening to this podcast for very long. I found out from her when because she has like a she follows all the court filings, and she has like his name is like flagged, and so she knew. So I found out from her even before the news article came out, and she's actually quoted in this news article. So I guess we'll find out from Molly, or whatever kind of what's going on. But so again, thanks to Molly for everything that she does in that regard, and go listen to Weird Little Guys.
Absolutely. So yeah, Cantwell news
Cable
wrapped
news
up for now.
for now.
But Cantwell is but one part of a wider world, and
I mean, he's a
the
big
wider
part of
world.
he's a big part of our world, in terms of like
Yes,
what we
yes.
do. He's a big part of what we do because he's entertaining and like that's what brings in the bucks, right? But you know,
Yeah,
but ultimately
the Bucks.
he's a very minor figure in terms of the actual horribleness that's happening in the world today, and I think that's what we're going to talk about for
But
the rest.
one
So
thread in the
yeah,
weave. Yeah.
and,
So here we are. God knows how many days into the second Trump presidency. How are you finding it? I mean, your impressions, Daniel. Your marks out of 10.
I
How do you think
mean,
he's doing?
in terms of yeah, are you going to grade him on terms of how I think he's doing, in terms of what I would want him to do, or in terms of like what to do, in terms of what he promised to do? Because like one of those things is a 0 out of 10, and the other is like a 12 out of 10. Oh, you know,
This is
um,
already too complicated for me to understand. I'm sorry. You've lost me.
sure. Well, I mean, there's this thing that like historians do where they like rank presidents, and it's like and it's
Oh
like
yeah, yeah.
when historians rank presidents, it's always like based on their domestic accomplishments, and it's not like based on like a moral value or a like it's just how effective were they at like getting things done, etc. And I always find that sort of like analysis, like, I mean, I get why historians do it, but I also find it like really like empty and meaningless to like to to do rankings like that. I mean, I guess it sells headlines or whatever. Um, but I guess what I mean is
It's
like,
just one of those things people are going to do. You have a list of
yeah,
guys
you got a list
who
of
all did the
guys.
same job. You're just
Yeah,
gonna, you're just gonna have people that rank them.
but like to rank like Abraham Lincoln, one of our greatest presidents, freed the slaves. God, what's his name? Andrew Jackson. Sorry, Andrew Jackson. I kept thinking Andrew Sullivan. Very different guy. Andrew
Yeah.
Jackson, one of our greatest
Well,
presidents, enslaved a bunch of people. Like it's like to compare these things. It's like to say, well, how effective were you as an administrator? How effective were you as an executive? And just to sort of like strip every value away from it, except like like sheer like effectiveness just always seems like a really like it's like very bloodless, but also like kind of bloodthirsty at the same time, because it's like you're both like denying like the reality of the historical circumstances, and it's just like, well, you know the greatest president of all time be the one who sets off World War III. It's like, oh well, he killed everybody, so like you win, buddy. It's like anyway, by that standard, what I think Trump should be doing, he's doing like again 0 out of 10. In terms of how effective he's being, he's much more effective than like I remember when we did the Trump wins episode, when we did that like beginning of November of last year. Um, I was kind of on the fence in terms of like how effective is he going to be. It's like I was like, well, he's going to be more effective in the second term than he was in the first. He's got more people who support him around him. He's got a Supreme Court that's going to support him and all this sort of thing. And the thing that I remember saying is, this Department of Government Efficiency thing is going to be, it's really unclear like what that's going to be. Is that going to be like a little project for Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy where they're going to, write up a report and like turn it in, because they're not going to have like actual government power. They're not going to be in a position of power within the government. And then it turns out,
yeah.
no, that's kind of the big surprise for me, is like just how much people with actual like authoritative political power, who are in positions of authority, who have laws behind them, have just like sat back and let Elon Musk just tear his way through the government and just like destroy so much stuff. Doge is so much. I mean, I I I am pretty cynical at this point, and I did not expect it to be like this bad in terms of just how much Doge was going to be able to get accomplished. It's I mean I'm actually kind of flabbergasted by it. I mean, I've come to accept it, and I kind of understand why it's happening. But it is like that to me is the big story. It's just like on day one, um, Doge is just coming out and just eviscerating stuff on no legal authority. When you've got like a 19-year-old named Big Balls who is like, quote
Mhm.
unquote, auditing the, you know, the major financial institutions and major parts of the government, and like just crushing like things because he doesn't know how to read COBOL. It's like this is just like there are like lifelong civil servants who are supposed to be in charge of this. There are people who are, like responsible adults who have actual enshrined legal authority, and they've just stepped aside and let this happen. And I don't know. I again, I find myself pretty cynical. I did not expect that. That is like the one big surprise to me, is like it is worse than I thought it was going to be, just based on Elon Musk and Doge.
Yes, I believe in our Trump wins episode we were talking about this, and I believe the phrase "kids table" came up.
Right.
I don't think we necessarily said definitely that was our opinion, that Musk and Ramaswamy were being given the kids table by the side of the adult table, but I think we at least raised that as a possible way it might fall out. And I think we talked about the ways in which sort of internal divisions would gum up the works, and really, you're absolutely right. What you've seen is just Musk rolling the whole thing up before him. He has just bulldozed, and it's quite something to see, because the man is completely, he's a fool. He's completely devoid of charisma. He has no idea what he's doing, but just through sheer force, I think that culture is just so hardwired to worship and cringe and bow and grovel before wealth, that's just what it is. It's just, he's just assumed power, and essentially he's, at least by some measures, he's kind of just, it's like a co-presidency.
Right.
And he's got Trump dancing to his tune in front of cameras. He's got Trump doing essentially Tesla adverts for him.
I mean,
on the White House lawn,
almost literally. I mean, like almost.
Yeah, pretty much literally.
Like ad reads. He's literally like, the cost of a new Tesla is 118,700 or whatever. Like it's like, it's bizarre.
But
it's bizarre.
You had the absolute, you the word bizarre, you had the absolutely bizarre, grotesque White House press conference thing where Trump's just sitting there at the Resolute desk, and the irony is that he looks like a little kid at the kids' table. I was using that phrase. While Musk is the one standing up and giving the meeting to the journalists, while his little toddler wanders around the White House and then wipes his snot on the Resolute desk and goes up to Trump and apparently tells him, you're not really the president, fuck off, and stuff like that. And Trump's just sitting there and taking it. But we had a thing just happened recently where you have this thing called the United States Institute of Peace, which is some sort of non-governmental organization. This is the point of the thing. It's very much not a governmental organization. Doge just rocked up there one day, and they said, you can't come in. And they came back, and somebody at some point called the cops because Doge were trying to get into this building. They have no authority, even granting the idea that Doge has some sort of legal authority to go into government organizations, the premises of government organizations, and just do what they want in there. Even granting that, which they're doing that regardless of whether they have the right or not. But even granting that, they can't do that with this organization because it's not a governmental organization. It's connected to the government. It's got government funding, but it's not a government organization. Right. So they come back and they're trying to force their way in. Cops get called, and the cops basically just let them in. And because it's the cops perceive Doge and Musk and all that, the forces of Trump stroke Musk as just the authority that must be obeyed. So they basically cede the situation to these people. And that, I think, that strikes me as a possible paradigm of what's happening right the way across the government. Everybody just perceives Musk and his organization as having this overriding authority. And was it Tim Snyder that said the don't obey in advance thing? That's precisely what they're doing. They're just obeying in advance. Hello, everybody. Jack from the future popping in here to correct myself, because the account that I just gave of that event, while overall basically accurate, is also inaccurate in some details. Most particularly the fact that the cops turned up in the middle of the situation because they were sent to make sure that Doge had full access to the United States Institute of Peace by the Trump Justice Department. So that makes it even worse than what I said. Anyway, back to the episode.
I think it's really one of those things where people are just terrified of Trump. I think people, especially at that level of government, like kind of understand Trump is a vindictive asshole and he's going to come after everybody who pisses him off. And he's got like tens of millions of people behind him at this point. And if Trump and Musk are, tied at the hip, then whatever Musk wants, Musk is going to get. And that's it's just, again, for me, it's just one of those things of, all my life, the Democrats have well, we have norms and we have rules for a reason. And we follow the rules because, these guys, Trump and Musk both are they're just knocking the chessboard over. They're knocking the checkerboard over and just, the pieces. It doesn't matter anymore. We're just going to do what we want. It's, I think one thing that's interesting is that if you look at what's actually been accomplished so far, it's been mostly, not entirely, but mostly Musk's things. It's all been, we're cutting out the regulators that will affect, Elon Musk. We're cutting out, the regulations.
Yeah, that's
the issues,
that I think is an under-discussed aspect of this. He is very deliberately, he is serving his own conflict of interest.
Right, exactly.
He's attacking people who were tasked with investigating him or overseeing him and his business dealings. Very definitely. They're basically just doing that openly. They're basically not hiding it now.
And less so, and this is less true in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I guess, but less of it. Certainly the immediate thing was, Musk is kind of driving the car. He's doing it's all what kind of like Musk is setting the agenda, as opposed to, the sort of the stuff that Trump ran on, like the deporting all illegals, quote unquote, and all that sort of thing. Which again, more of that's been happening lately, but it is interesting that at least, I think I did a thing on Blue Sky about this. Is talking about this kind of interesting dichotomy is that really what's been accomplished so far has been mostly Musk's priorities as opposed to Trump's. And so it's almost it's hard to even call this a Trump priority because ultimately what he's done is just allowed Musk to go in and raid the piggy bank. And again, that's less true now than it was, a few weeks ago. But yeah, no, that's the big, I think that's the big takeaway from the first 2 months to me is a degree to which Doge has been a much larger force, and a much more insidious force. We always knew it was going to be insidious, but the fact that it's been just almost completely unopposed, is surprising to me. It's surprising.
And, this is going to have Musk is, I've said this many times, Musk is completely pilled. He is an ideological fascist at this point.
Yeah.
And in the, in the same sort of vein, at least in some ways, as Cantwell, he's swallowed the entire sort of libertarian bonkers dogma about the state and all that. This is a concerted attack upon the ability of the state to administer society, to be regulatory, and the effects are going to be. I think it was the Washington Post. It might have been a different paper that did a kind of estimate of the effects of these cuts to international aid programs. And USAID. There's plenty of things to criticize,
right.
But we're talking about potentially several million people across the world that are going to die because of this funding being cut off, this aid funding being cut off. This is going to kill million. It already has.
Yeah,
killed.
Even just killing
PEPFAR.
Even just killing PEPFAR, which is the thing that's preventing infants from getting AIDS in Africa.
Yeah,
could cause tens of millions of deaths over the course of.
I think the AIDS.
Yeah,
I think the AIDS programs is one of the big ones, if I remember rightly. Yeah, in their calculation.
Just that one, and that's that's a George W. Bush program. I've called George W. Bush the worst president of my lifetime many times on this podcast, and that's the thing he gets credit for. I'll give him credit for that. Bush did a great thing there, and it's just been cut completely because and that's the thing. I've been listening to a lot of kind of more mainstream right-wing news. I've been listening to a lot of Megyn Kelly, I said this to Jack before before we started the podcast, but Megyn Kelly is kind of my like obsessive interest right now. But like you hear this from like Tim Pool, you hear it from Jack Posobiec, you hear it from if you talking heads on Fox News, et cetera, et cetera. Is like this idea that like, well, they're just cutting out waste. They're just cutting out they're just auditing these government processes. They're like, maybe they cut some stuff that didn't need to cut, and we can bring that stuff back. And it's like, no, this is not like we're doing an audit. It's going to take 6 months. We're going to like look at where the money is going and kind of determine. No, they're cutting off the spigot. They're cutting off the funding for everything immediately, and they're doing it like vindictively immediately. And yeah, we could talk about what USAID has to say about like American soft power and like, to what degree that's a CIA cutout or whatever. I think that's a bullshit talking point, but we could talk about that. Right. And the degree to which like it's the velvet glove by which, the US government like engages with the world. But like, again, talking about tens of millions of lives that are going to be lost because of this, and it's unconscionably evil. And it's like, it's in terms of the US, in terms of the budget, like you're not making a dent in the budget, dude. Like, there have been one of the best, I think Wired did this. I think Wired has been one of the great news sources of the last 2 months in terms of actually like, tracking this stuff day by day. Can't remember where I saw this, but there are journalists who have looked into, like how much money have they actually saved, and what goes up on the Doge website versus, okay, well, what did this actually cost, and how much is it really going to save us? And it's like they're saving jack shit. Salaries, like the entire, like if you got rid of every U.S. government employee, including active duty military members, like if you just killed all that salary and you just don't pay those salaries anymore, that's like 8% of the like U.S. government budget. Like you're just like killing the NIH, killing NSAID or USAID, killing all these little penny programs in terms of what they mean in terms of the U.S. government budget. It's pennies on the dollar. It's literally pennies on the dollar. It means nothing in terms of like actual like government waste or whatever. It's just
meanwhile, Pentagon budget's going up because of course it is.
Right.
The great, peace president, the anti-war president, he's making noises about, and I think he really means this. I mean, we were talking about sort of previous presidents and who's considered great and so on and so forth. I think Trump genuinely sees himself as like an expansionist, imperialist, conquering 19th century president. I think he sees himself as an Andrew Jackson. I think he sees himself as a Polk. I think he is actually thinking in terms of military expansion. I think he's going to try to take the Panama Canal. I think he's going to try to launch military incursions on Mexico and maybe even Canada. He's making noises about Iran. He's bombing Yemen, and of course, Tulsi Gabbard, the great principled anti-war candidate, she's backing him to the hilt and trying to get other people to join in. Of course, So, what are we even talking about here?
Yeah, no, I will say like the single thing. I'm just like this is the thing that like it means nothing in the scale of things, but like the single dumbest thing that like he's done, that just rankles on me personally, that just puts my teeth on edge, is the Gulf of America. I just think that's the single dumbest thing, and that's the thing. Like that's one of those things where even early on in the first few days, it's like, well, what does Trump have the authority to do by executive order? And like, look. Biden changed the name of Fort Bragg to, I think it was Fort Liberty. He changed the name of Mount McKinley to Denali. This is actually, presidents have the authority to do this. It's basically the president can issue an order to the USGIS, the U.S. Geographic Information Service. I think that's what that stands for. But they can issue an order and like, this is the new name for this. This is what we're, in all our official documentation, this is what we're going to call it. Trump absolutely has the ability to rename the Gulf of Mexico for the purposes of like official documents. He can rename it. He can name it the Gulf of Melania if he wants to. The Gulf of Trump. the Gulf of Barren. He can name it whatever he wants because that's actually a thing the president gets to do. Now we can argue about whether that's a thing that the president should get to do, and I think that's probably not something the president gets to do. But I think it's a good thing that when Joe Biden renamed Mount McKinley Denali, I think that's I applaud that. It's literally a gesture. It's literally words over substance, but at least it's words. But for Trump to literally turn all of that back and then also to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America and just like I'm calling it the Gulf of America because it's our Gulf, and then like suddenly the entire right-wing apparatus starts calling it the Gulf of America, and if you don't call it the Gulf of America and you're in a journalistic outfit that is not going to like call it the Gulf of America, you don't get to ask questions to this president anymore. Like that's just like it is. It's both completely stupid. It's just so stupid to call it the Gulf of America. It's just so bad, but it's so insidious. It's so like it really is.
Yeah.
He's just using his own authority. He's just saying like you're going to call it what I want you to call it, or you don't get to be in the room. You don't get to be a part. And it's like it's just like who's going to obey and who's not going to obey, and that's just kind of the reality of it. And I can pull up Google Maps right now, and because Google Maps goes off of in my country, Google Maps will go off to the USGS designations. They, almost universally do that for their mapping. And so if I pull up Google Maps and like scroll into the Gulf of Mexico, we'll say Gulf of America right now, and it's just like my God, like it's just so stupid. I'm sorry, that's the one that rankles on me like more than anything else because it's just so asinine. It's just so like what a 10-year-old would do is to just name it. This should be the Gulf.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know. It's so indicative of so much of the rest of the nonsense that Trump is doing. And it's just so petty. It's so vile and so petty and so stupid that it has to be called the Gulf of America. Sorry, I'll get off that. I'll get off this horse. But I mean, I just had to talk about that. It's so ridiculous to me.
I think it's a really good marker. I agree. We've got very insidious stuff happening. We have the essentially black bagging of Mahmoud Khalil.
Oh yeah.
Which that's not to downplay for a moment the specific case because it's a horrible injustice to him and his family, and it's obviously aimed at it's aimed at the apart from being aimed at him, it's aimed at the Palestinian Gaza Solidarity Movement,
right?
And it's also a trial balloon. It's been very obvious. I mean, this is why you try to strip. This is why they're going after birthright citizenship and stuff like that. If you can strip one citizen or person entitled to legal rights of those rights, then do that to anybody you want. That's what this is about. This is the classic frog in the pan, with the temperature turned up, and they've gone for somebody that a lot of people, even people on the sort of liberal centrist left, will not want to defend because they do not want to defend the Gaza protests. A lot of liberals and centrists went along with the slander of the protests at the universities in the Gaza Solidarity Movement. They went along with the bullshit talking points about it being bullying of Jewish students and anti-Semitism and stuff like that. And you're a Hamas sympathizer. That's pretty mainstream in the Democratic Party. That sort of thing.
No, absolutely.
Protest this stuff. You get told, go back to China or go back to Hamas or whatever. So they've picked a soft target, which is very difficult for their ostensible opponents to argue with, but even based on their own ideas. And you see that in the interview that Chuck Schumer just did, where he basically he just batted it away by saying, "Oh, I don't know about the case." Well, if he broke the law, then it's fine. If he didn't, then he shouldn't be. That's what you get from Chuck Schumer. And then he's supporting the cuts, the massive cuts of government funding to Columbia. I think the Trump administration is also cutting huge amounts of money to Penn and other universities. And specifically with Schumer, it's on the grounds of the protests of the Gaza Solidarity protests. So it's working, and they're essentially collaborating. with him. And you see that, of course, with the advancement of the CR bill in the Senate. Same thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what you see here is like it's much more targeted. It's much more effective. It's like going after this one protester. You go after him. It's a test case, and once you can prove you can do it to Khalil, you can do it to anybody because they're effectively saying, "Well, you're a foreigner. You're not an American citizen, which he is not. And you're engaging in quote unquote terrorist acts by supporting Hamas."
He has a green card. To be clear, he has a green card.
Right,
he has an American wife. So he has legal protections, and what's been done to him is completely extra legal. I know you know that. I'm just making that.
No, absolutely. I agree. I have not looked deeply into the case, but like, I understand completely. But they make an example, and ultimately the point is to like ignore those fine distinctions. The point is to like say, you're a foreigner, you're not an American. I found you engaging in quote unquote terrorist activity. We get to define what that means. You're gone. Or we can prosecute you, or we can deport you, or we can do whatever we want. And it's just a way of like setting the like legal status. And like the courts are, I don't know, Khalil, the case, I'm really hoping that like the courts will step up and do something about this. And, we'll like, I don't know if it goes to the Supreme Court, what's going to happen. Ultimately that's kind of the big question is what happens when all this shit gets to the Supreme Court in 6 months. But, and then what happens if Trump just decides to ignore the Supreme Court? That's another question, of course. But like, there are ultimately, if the courts like don't stand in the way, if they just kind of let this happen, it just sets it up for, and then suddenly like tens of millions of people are subject to the exact same logic. And I think one of the most disquieting things I've seen is, I don't know if you saw this, the video of the quote unquote MS-13 members who are flown to this open air prison, or not even open air prison, this concentration camp. I was
going to raise that next, because that's a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Yeah,
the guys who are supposedly, there's no evidence of it, supposedly members of this, I think it's supposed to be some Venezuelan drug gang that Trump keeps talking about, but he can't pronounce the name of it. And they've been, again, essentially black bagged completely extra legally and sent to, it's this famously brutal prison in El Salvador, isn't it? The judge ruled that they couldn't do that, and they just pretty much openly defied the judge's ruling. And they're getting quite a bit of pushback from judges here and there. Like, a judge blocked the spending freeze way back, and then another judge blocked the military trans ban. It's happening quite a bit, and they're obviously barreling into a confrontation with the courts, with the judges. They're going full out in an ideological assault on this judge. The GOP members are talking about getting him impeached, and they're just defying the court's ruling on this. Those guys, no trial, no hearing, no evidence. They've done anything wrong. They're gone. They're in that prison in El Salvador.
Right.
It's done.
Well, and based on like, they have quote unquote gang tattoos, like, which that means nothing. That means
Your Secretary of Defense has a fucking neo-Nazi tattoo, Donald. He's got a Deus Vult tattoo.
But he doesn't speak Spanish, so it's fine. Oh, yeah, no. I mean, I swear that video. I'm assuming you saw the video. Where they take these guys down. The flight lands, and they take them out, and they're in chains. They're shackled. Their ankles to their knees, and
the video that half the House GOP masturbated to. Yeah, I saw it.
Exactly. Yeah, no. I mean, and you look at that and it's like, I saw that and I'm like, this is like the opening sequence of like a really great movie about a prison break. So I don't read this. It's like, I think this is like how fascist ideology kind of works in a certain way. It's like, they look at those movies and they think, no, the guys with the truncheons and the masks who are like, holding the scum in chains. No, those are the heroes. And it's like, I don't think so, Tim. Like it's not the way it works.
You're thinking of the same thing I'm thinking of, the Tim Pool during the Black Lives Matter protests, when he famously said, well, when we were kids watching movies like V for Vendetta, the guys that were black bagging protesters, they were the bad guys. But isn't it ironic that now we're grown up and it's really happening and they're the good guys?
Well, I was referencing an American sitcom called Home Improvement with a character named Tim Tim the Toolman Taylor.
Oh, I see.
And one of the you know one of the he has an assistant named Al Borland, and Al Borland, it's a terrible TV show, but there's a great series of video essays that's like behind the paywall right now, that's about kind of, it's complicated, but anyway, it's been on my mind lately. But Al Borland, whenever Tim would do something really stupid, Al would kind of go, well, I don't think so, Tim. So sorry, that was my reference there, but no, you're absolutely right. And this is, I mean, again, this is how fascist ideology works, is they, I mean, I was listening to something, I think yesterday, about like this guy who used to be a member of the Hammerskins. And the Hammerskins was like an on the ground, fascist movement. And they took their name, and they took their kind of from Pink Floyd's The Wall, and the crossed hammers, which was completely made up for The Wall, right? And it's supposed to be a parody of like fascist ideology. It's supposed to be, but they took it as, no, we're going to do this for real, like, and that's kind of part of the problems of like even doing media depictions of this kind of like fascist stuff, is like, because they just think it's cool and they'll just take the imagery for themselves.
Yeah,
no.
Well, they done that over and over, haven't they?
Yeah. I mean, even
Pepe
like
the Frog is
right. Yeah, no, it's exactly. I mean, they'll just, I mean, it's oversimplistic to say, well, fascists can't create art of their own, because of course people are people and fascists are people and people can create art, et cetera, et cetera. But like, you really do, when you find like the really potent symbols, they're almost always taken from a source that does not derive its source from fascism. It comes from another place. And in particular, they use like sort of anti-fascist art. They use, or non-fascist art, or, they often use those depictions. They mine those depictions for the imagery that they're going to use in their propaganda. And that's exactly what's happening with that video. When they did the mass deportation ASMR, or whatever it's called, where it's like the clinking of chains and being like, and it's all about this dehumanization of these people, and look, we don't know what any of these individuals have done, right? Maybe that's a really bad dude. All right, let's just assume, okay, he murdered 13 people, he raped his cat, like whatever, right? That still doesn't justify this kind of behavior. It doesn't justify this kind of state violence done upon this person. If we have to lock this, if this person needs to be locked away for the safety of others, I mean, that's certainly a conversation we should have. And I, as a prison abolitionist, I have problems with that, but I could agree with that, in the short term at least. But even if these people are the worst of the worst, it doesn't justify this kind of propaganda, because ultimately what these people do is they stand in for every brown-skinned person. That's the point,
Well, it's not even the point, is it? What they did or didn't do is not the point. That when they raise stuff like that, I mean, firstly, they're lying, or they're making stuff up, or whatever. But they're doing it to make you forget about the point. The point is not what they may or may not have done. If they did something, then yeah, they should get. If you did something or you didn't do something, you should get due process. That's what due process is, and that's the problem. They didn't get due process, and if they can take due process away from them, they can take it away from anybody they want, which is why they're doing it. We were just talking about Cantwell, we were saying, we wouldn't wish the horrors of the American prison system on anybody, even Cantwell. And I agree with that. I don't, if Cantwell needs to be somewhere where he can't hurt people, and we know that this guy is dangerous and poisonous and he does hurt people. Yeah, sure. But he shouldn't be deprived of his legal rights in the process. Right. And I wouldn't use the horrors that the man is responsible for as a way to justify that. That's the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's like, well, they didn't go after your family, they didn't go after your daughter, they didn't go after your wife, and it's like, that that doesn't fucking matter. Like, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like it's just, yeah, it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that.
Yeah. And I understand why, for instance, I understand why Lake and Riley's family have the view that they have on Trump and Trump's crime approach and stuff like that. I understand. That's why we don't put the family of the victim on the jury, with all due respect.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
why.
and there are plenty of fathers and mothers and children of people who have been subject to this kind of violence, who do
Yeah.
not believe in this sort of thing,
Yeah,
who do not
absolutely.
go that
Yeah.
way. And so, like, you know, if we're going to make decisions based on Laken Riley's family, as horrible as what happened to Laken Riley, and like, I'm not gonna, let's not deny that, right? As horrible as that is,
Hmm.
the thing that you're trying to do in response to that is to take every person who fits a category of that person who did that crime, the person who might possibly commit that crime, and submit those people, millions and millions of people, to horrifying state violence. And that's I mean, it's, the Gaza Israel thing. It's like, yeah, we
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
say that
Collective
that the
punishment. Yeah,
that the
exactly.
Gaza that the actions of Hamas on October 7th were horrific. If they are subjected
Yes.
to like civilian populations, and a lot of that stuff was exaggerated, but even if we say all that is true, even if we say every single bit of it is true, that doesn't mean you get to carpet bomb 2 million people. It just doesn't. It
Yeah.
just it's completely like, and it is just this. I don't know. This is just a
Well,
fundamental disconnect with people.
let's
Is
take an actual sort of left approach. I mean, even to, I'm slightly hesitant to bring this up because this is an actual person who suffered an actual crime, and died, and it's horrible. But I'm not trying to exploit her memory. Laken Riley. If we're talking about her, far more than illegal immigration, the problem there is misogyny and rape culture.
yeah,
We're not talking about all men, regardless of the right wing propaganda about what people on the left think about this, we're not talking about all men being held responsible for that crime.
right, exactly.
We're just
It's
not.
we're not, and that's, I mean, it's certainly much more a proximate cause than immigration status. So I
Yeah,
completely agree. And it would also be a crime to like blame every man, and I say that not just because I'm a man, like, and an American man at that point. Um, yeah, no, I mean, it's just, I think the thing that I run into like is in the public consciousness. It's like the actions of the actions of a single individual, like that person is savage. That person is, has committed a crime and deserves whatever comes to him. And the actions of a state, the actions of a government,
yes,
the actions of like,
yeah,
well, that is inherently civilized because like, well, we have rules and we have norms and we made laws about this, and well, you broke the law, and so like and the violence of the state, the violence of the system, um, doesn't rise to the same furor. It's just like, well, that's just the way the system works. A shrug, as opposed to the actions of even the worst individuals. Like, and it is like, but the U.S. government, like I'm an American. The U.S. government operates in my name. And I don't consent to this. You know what I mean? We have to see these things as equivalent, or not even equivalent. We have to see the actions of a government like enforcing like mass violence across like whole swaths of people, in order to like prevent even horrible crimes. That's a million times worse. It's so much worse. And I don't know, it's just so hard to get people into that headspace to think of it that way.
they garner a certain amount of support by going for that those emotional things that they can get people to agree with because they feel them. When Trump says stuff like, "Oh, these people, yeah, they're not even people; they're animals," and
Yeah.
the left don't like it when I call them people. Well, when I call them animals, but they're animals. He's going to get an awful lot of support for that in the public. I don't think majority support. I don't think the majority of people feel that way, but he's going to get a lot of support for that position. It works. That sort of rhetoric works for them, and it's because I mean, it's all sorts of reasons. One of the reasons is that people live in a media culture that systematically, hypes up crime and simplifies it and decontextualizes it and dehumanizes the people that commit it. And saying that they should be treated as people is not to excuse the things that violent criminals do. It's just to point out that they are in fact people and not animals, and they do in fact have human rights regardless of what they've done. But the media culture that people live in encourages the opposite viewpoint. So they zone straight at, people like Trump, they just zone straight in on that weak point and they exploit it for all it's worth.
Yeah, no, agree. I mean, and some of the stuff that's being done to these detainees or whatever, I wouldn't even do to an animal. Like it's just
Yeah, yeah,
if you did that to a rabid dog, people would people would immediately see the cruelty. Which is interesting, right? Is that people would see more empathy for a dog than they would for someone who is put into this terrorist category. I don't know.
yeah,
It's just so vile to me, and it's just like it's gonna get worse. It's just gonna get worse. This is the beginning of it. Because
yeah,
frankly, the Democrats are not standing in the way. They're just by and large they simply are not. Um,
yeah.
there
We
are
have a few
individuals.
who were.
There are
Yeah,
a few. There are a
that's where
few.
you're going.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. There are a few who have really kind of stood up and been brave. And you know, as many problems as I have with AOC, I hope she primaries the fuck out of Chuck Schumer come that time, and I hope she wins. That would that would be the win of the decade for me, honestly. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
questionably as
Si-
you know,
Similarly, Bernie Sanders, somebody I have lots of criticisms of, but
yeah,
he's leading. He's
yeah,
leading a popular fight back. He's going to red areas, and
yeah.
he's doing the populist left rhetoric about oligarchs. And is that completely ideologically in line with my viewpoint? No, it's not. But he's doing it without backtracking on Gaza. He's doing it without backtracking on trans rights. You know, it's it's as good as it gets
Well,
at the moment.
Tim Walz has said some stuff in the last couple of days,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
was, it's very clear.
Tim Walz keeps saying Medicare, 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 and he keeps on saying for all, for all, for all. He just needs to join those two bits up.
Right. Yeah, yeah. But it is very clear that and this is a criticism. I mean, look, we can do this criticism. I'm just going to do this briefly. It's like it's very clear that like Bernie and AOC and Tim Walz and like all these people, like once they were in like sort of the Biden team, once they were in the warm hug of the club, there were certain things you don't criticize, and everybody went with the program. I don't think that's okay. I don't think that's okay. But now
No,
that they're out of that, now that this is done, um, I wish they had spoken with their big boy and girl voices at the time. That would have been nice. But I
yeah,
understand how you make that decision. I've never been in that place to have to make that decision, but I understand why you make that decision. What I care about is what you do now. What I care about is like moving forward. And Tim Walz, like he was picked as VP, and he had like a couple of weeks where he was coming out and breathing fire. And then like the Harris campaign, and I'm sure that was hugely, the Biden team, just sort of like, enforced a certain like regularity on it, and like he toned it down, and he got really boring and stupid for a while. But like,
yeah,
if Tim Walz keeps talking like he's talking now, like I'd support him for 2028, no question, and like Tim Walz is not my politics. I mean, what he did in Minneapolis in 2020 is unconscionable, but like, he's about the best we're going to get at this point. You know, again, I'm not putting my hat behind a candidate, and we don't endorse candidates here for obvious reasons, but we don't endorse electoral politics for reasons. But like there are things that these people could be doing, and I think that like the Schumer bit, and I don't know if we need to talk in detail about it and like the continuing resolution. I don't have the details in my head, but
no. I think the gist is clear.
I think the thing with Schumer, I think that really what's happening and the kind of immediate response from at least alternative or semi-alternative media figures like the Sam Cedars and the Jon Stewarts, these people who are kind of like outside that like MSNBC bubble, but who are relatively mainstream, are really like bringing the fire to Chuck Schumer, and I think that's a good sign. I think again, even in the last couple of days, it's like maybe Chuck Schumer being a dipshit, maybe we bring some life into some people, and maybe we start to see some kind of difference. But I'll believe it when I see it. At this point, that's kind of where I land on that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But at the other end of the spectrum, to the people we've been talking about, you have Gavin Newsom, who has started up his own podcast, and his guests so far have been Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon, and they've been very amiable chats where they've agreed about a whole lot of stuff. So we're really seeing Mr. Newsom's true colors, I think. I think a lot of people have seen those colors for quite a while, but I think they're now pretty undeniable.
There are a lot of people who would have like gritted their teeth and voted for Gavin Newsom up until like, a few days ago, up until like a week ago. And I think that's just completely gone now. It's hard for me to imagine that he's like as like a presidential candidate. Um, I think he's done, honestly. It would be hard for me to imagine that you get to do that. And then maybe he runs as a Republican. Maybe that's maybe that's the future.
Well, I was going to say that's, I can see him doing a Tulsi,
Yeah, no. I mean, that's entirely possible. But there was a kind of big like thing of like Newsom is the next big thing, at least in kind of U.S. politics, in terms of like kind of thinking, down the line another 5 or 10 years. It's like Newsom is clearly like setting himself up, and I think it's just you read the room wrong, dude. Like and there is this division among the Democratic side of the aisle in terms of kind of the more, if we kind of think of it as like Bernie versus Hillary thing. It's the same divide, and it's hard to put numbers on like exactly what those percentages are, but the people who lean more Bernie, the people who lean more Hillary, and the Hillary people have always kind of just taken the day, have always just kind of won the day, and they just get to be in charge because they have the money behind them for other reasons. But Newsom is just following that playbook. It's just like, okay, we're just gonna, we're gonna sidle up to Lynn Cheney. We're going to do campaign speeches with Lynn Cheney instead of like supporting, the left side of the party.
Unforgivable.
Newsom is following like the James Carville advice, and they're going to throw trans people on the bus to do all that sort of shit. And ultimately, time's going to tell about like how effective that's going to be. But like,
well, their poll numbers are through the floor. The big Democrat plan is to wait until Trump gets so unpopular and, just let him make himself unpopular, and then the midterms come along and blah, 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 blah. And, with Schumer, it's specifically, well, his approval rating is this low, but we need it even lower, and then we can pounce and stuff. It's like, well, your approval rating's even worse.
Right,
this
exactly.
Isn't working. This is not working.
He literally does the logic of
it's
like...
worse. It's worse because you're not fighting, but of course you'll never get them to see that because it's just absolutely a faith position for those people. They go right, they run on the right, and they lose. And the conclusion isn't running on the right was bad. The conclusion is always we need to go further right because we were too left. That's just it's just they do not have the mental capacity to conceptualize anything else.
Which is what they've been doing for longer than I've been alive. I mean, that goes back to like the Vietnam War, if not earlier. Like you punch a hippie. That's just how you get elected in democratic politics. Is punch the fucking hippie. It's always been vile. It's just, yeah. Anyway, we should probably talk about that Zelensky meeting at least briefly.
Oh God, yeah.
Which was just another moment of
what the fuck?
Well, I mean, if Doge is the kind of epitome of domestic policy and sort of like internal stuff, what the U.S. government does internally, even though like the USAID is obviously externally focused, etc. But if Doge is sort of like taking the knocking the beams out from the ceiling of the American experiment and domestically, then that meeting with Zelensky was doing that in terms of U.S. foreign policy. I think that and the tariffs, but I think that Zelensky meeting, and I mean just talking down to Zelensky, like treating him like an errant child who is who needs a spanking. And you haven't said thank you even once in this meeting,
Which yes, he has. He has said thank you.
And if you watch the full meeting, they had a very like pleasant exchange for most. Like it was a very I don't want to say productive meeting or whatever, but like there was a back and forth, and then suddenly it was time to strike. And really, I mean, this is where it's like Trump's personality kind of gets in his way. Is really the thing I think that really set him off was Zelensky says you're separate. You're separate. Right now it's us, but one day it will be you. You have these oceans separating you, but one day it will be you who is like subject to this. And Trump, no, we're America. We're never gonna, like we're strong. I'm Trump. Trump is America. We're never gonna, it's never gonna be us. And that seemed to be the moment in which things really fell apart. And the consequences of
he
this,
dared to suggest that Trump might have to face weakness, and that's
right?
just
Well, or that America or Trump himself, and I think Trump sees himself as like this kind of in some way this visage of America, or this icon of
oh yeah,
America. It's
no,
like
this is what I mean. We've talked in the past about Hitler. We talked a bit about Adolf Hitler when we did the big guy in fascism. We talked a little bit about him when we did the downfall episode, and we talked a bit about the Kershaw biography. One of the big things one of Kershaw's themes in that is that Hitler came to just see himself and Germany as basically the same thing. Just psychologically,
right.
he just saw himself as like the human instantiation of Germany. I think Trump absolutely just thinks he is America. He just, you know, he just thinks America is like this big mech suit that he wears, and when he
Right.
moves his arm, America moves its arm in sync. I think that's just how he that's just how he feels.
Right. Well, no, I absolutely agree. And yeah, I mean, he sees himself as that, and this sort of American exceptionalism, which is like a Trump exceptionalism, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's never going to come to us because we're strong, and it's never going to come here because, well, we're going to take the Panama Canal, and we're going to own Greenland, and we're going to annex Canada, and we're going to, and he's like, and we're going to have like, and there are ways of like, there are ways of like thinking of this in terms of like instead of this kind of like U.S. led rules based order, like this post World War II rules based order, we're gonna have like realms of like polarity, like a multipolar world in which like China has its sphere of influence and the U.S. has a sphere of influence, which will basically be the Americas, and then Russia has its sphere of influence, and it will kind of like, but like, and maybe if again, I am no Pollyannish person about the horrors of like what lies underneath the rules based order, especially in terms of like Central America and Africa, etc. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of or Central and South America and Africa. But I'm not sure that a world in which U.S. is exerting like colonial influence across the Americas and like leaving Europe to its own devices to combat Russia is like a more stable world. I don't see that as as like a positive outcome
No,
for this.
no, yeah,
Um, as bad as the U.S. is, I think China and Russia would both be like worse, and I think that is. I don't know if we have any tanky listeners, but fuck off. But
yeah.
you know, um, don't I think there are numerous examples both in history and in present day of like Russia and China, yeah, actually worse than the U.S. on these things. As bad as the U.S. is, and I'm not defending the U.S. history of these things. I'm just saying, as bad as that is, it's not going to be better, without the U.S. kind of exerting
Yeah,
this
yeah.
role here. I think really and this is why I think this is a big upheaval is Zelensky goes away, and what he's going to do is he's going to start making he's going to get supplies from Europe, and he's going to make ties with Europe, and they're going to build a nuclear
Well,
program.
yeah. Europe is starting to show signs of realizing that it's going to have to start sort of rethinking. The the Western imperialist alliance. The most obvious manifestation of that being NATO. For decades now has just been inherently Atlanticist. It's just been Europe and America, just inherently. Europe is starting to, I'm no admirer of Keir Starmer. I thought the way he came to grovel to Trump and here's an invitation from the king to come and visit Britain again. It's a great honor. It made me sick. But and they're slashing benefits in this country. They're going to throw millions of people basically onto the rubbish dump, disabled people on benefits, unemployed people. They're going to starve because of this filthy, evil government. Keir Starmer understands, devoted, imperialist as much every Labour leader, Labour prime minister has always been. He clearly understands, as do many people in Europe now, that a realignment is taking place, and Europe is going to have to start thinking about how to manage this stuff, like an aggressive, belligerent, expansionist, irredentist Russian dictatorship. It's going to have to start figuring out how to contain this on its own. Clearly,
I think a bunch of countries are going to get nukes that haven't had them previously.
Yeah,
because and,
which is great.
Which that's
Wonderful.
really gonna add to world stability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just like everything is ashes, everything is flames right now.
Yeah.
It's just
And on top of that, we have, I mean, the big difference, of course, between a Democrat and a Republican administration is that the American government now has a coherent foreign policy over Ukraine and Gaza. Under Biden, they had essentially reversed positions in both places. You were supporting the resistance in one place and the aggressor in the other. Now the American government is just supporting the aggressor in both places, and the ceasefire in Gaza just pretty much. I mean, it's clear now from what they've done that it was pretty much a trap, to lure people back in so that they could finish the job, because they're just slaughtering people again
yeah,
that came back after the
absolutely.
ceasefire in Gaza.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another, just terrible, surreal, like this sounds like something that only could happen in in the broadest of political satires is we're gonna turn Gaza into a into beach front property. We're gonna have
Yeah,
resorts like beach resorts in Gaza. And like there was this like AI generated thing of like Gaza, and it's like it's just like the Riviera, the Middle Eastern Riviera, and it's just like,
that's
oh my
it. Yeah,
God.
yeah.
You're gonna
Uh,
build your Riviera on the bones of 2 million people. It's just
yeah.
and God, it's just
Well, I mean,
so
that's what
disgusting.
they would That's what they were going to turn Auschwitz into a sort of, a model town, a showcase town of the new German Greater Reich. It was going to have like spas and shopping centers and holiday camps, and yeah, it was going to be a wonderful place, and it would have been built on, as you say, the ashes and bones of millions of people. Well, nowadays the American president just says that openly about Gaza.
Yeah. I mean,
You
then
know,
again, so much of the U.S. is also built on the graves of
Well,
if
yeah,
not millions, at
yeah,
least hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of people. I mean, so it's it's the settler colonial project ultimately.
it
So
is.
it
Yes.
is that it's let's not play hypocrisy here, but to be
No, no.
that blatant about it, it's just like it does feel like you know a new level of horror to me. It's just like and it's just what we do every day now. It's just, every day you open up your blue sky feed and this is what's happening today.
Yeah, and there's always jokes to be made about it, and the people making the jokes know that the jokes are terrible. But what do we do? There's this overpowering feeling of helplessness.
Yep.
But there is a protest wave in America. There is quite a large
Yep.
protest wave in America, but it all feels dispersed and disconnected, and it's not gaining any traction. The one thing that has given me a certain amount of hope in recent days is the massive explosion of protest in Europe. We have in Hungary, Romania, and Serbia, we have a massive protest movement on the streets. And it is direct. I mean, there's national complexities and political complexities to it, but it is basically a response to that same triangle that is currently in the process of taking over the United States, the triangle of corruption, authoritarianism, and austerity. And that does, that shows the way, I think.
Yep.
But
Yep.
whether or not that way can be followed in America remains to be seen. But
Well,
that's the only thing that will do it.
I see the Tesla protests and the fact that like people like spray painting the Cybertrucks and spray painting dicks on
Yeah,
the Cybertrucks and stuff like it's a much smaller scale thing. It's not the same thing, but it's like it's in the same. I mean,
it's a start.
Tesla stock is in the toilet right now.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's the bulk of where like Elon Musk's personal like fortune
yes,
comes from. If Tesla
yes,
crashes hard enough, Elon Musk is gonna like he has to do like a margin call or shit. He has to like he's it will hurt him in the place where it will actually hurt him. And so I
yeah.
think anything you can do to like abolish that brand legally with due process, etc. Um,
And
you know,
Trump is, don't think for a moment that he doesn't care about that, because he
no,
absolutely does.
no, he does.
And Trump is, he's steering the United States economy towards an artificial crash, an artificial recession. And again, don't buy any of this stuff from people that will tell you, oh, then they're doing that deliberately because they want to institute the shock doctrine. Okay, maybe some of the wingnuts around Trump are thinking that. I don't say not. But like the big monopoly capitalists that gambled on Trump in order to get what they wanted, Musk and Zuckerberg and Bezos and so on, they do not want a global recession. Trust me, they do not.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, I feel like we know our audience. I hope we don't have a whole lot of people in our audience who are, kind of thinking in that kind of conspiratorial way. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. We see that, and I hear you. Look, if you want to have a conversation about that, I'm happy to have a private conversation. But like, still, like, I think that stuff is silly. Ultimately, like billionaires are going to billionaire, and like as much as like I admire the shock doctrine as a concept in a book, that's not really what's happening here. It's these guys want to, they want to do this thing.
I don't think Naomi Klein holds that it is. I mean, I think that's a misuse of her theoretical framework.
Right. Agreed. Sorry, I was just talking. It's fine. I think that's all I have for right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that'll do.
I mean, there's more. We could keep going on for more, but we've been going on for like an hour and a half. I think we've done enough for now. I don't know. Like people have like kind of messaged me or kind of not DM'd me, but kind of tweeted at me as like like wanting us to kind of talk about this stuff more. And this stuff is easy to produce. I don't have to like do like 10 hours of prep work in order to produce an episode about like some dipshit that 40 people have heard of. And so if you want us to kind of cover this stuff more often, then we can. I just don't know that this is the best use of the platform necessarily. So please let us know what you think of it. Like, do you want more of this? Do you want us to kind of come in and talk about current events? Because these are, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I don't know, Jack can speak for himself, but these are easy to produce. This is the easy stuff. And we didn't come in with a plan. We were just following the news and, but we can make like, we could do the somewhere news thing of like picking like 3 news stories and talking through them. Like, that would be, let's steal somebody else's format. That's fine.
The one thing I saw was that Rogan had Daryl Cooper on his show. Daryl Cooper, who we talked about in a previous episode, who was the Holocaust denier, pseudo historian that was interviewed by Tucker and was mutuals on X with JD Vance. Yeah, he was on Rogan, and I did I got this little itch at the back of my brain that thought that could be an episode. I could watch that and get some clips and talk about that. And then I thought, are you actually volunteering to do that, Jack?
Yeah, right.
Good, I suppose.
Do you want to take my job at this point? Like that's fine. You did Jimmy Dore, that was fine with me. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I've got some other like I've got some more kind of more official episodes. I've got them kind of creaking up, and hypothetically, I'm going to be walking again soon, and the pain is going to be less, and I've got some personal life stuff going on that like when that's good and done with, then it's going to be a lot easier to kind of come back a little bit more full time. But I think until then, I think we will kind of keep doing. I know we've got another episode where we're going to be recording in the next day or two.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're coming back, and we keep promising we're back, and then like things happen and we're not back. But the plan is to at least ease our way back in and do more stuff, because I think people have been asking for our input on this stuff, and
we've got concepts of being back. Let's put it that way.
we have illusions of being back. We're doing our best.
We are. Well, you are. Okay, so thanks, Daniel, and thanks for listening, everybody. And we will see you again very soon, as long as there's no massive snafus, with a really interesting interview, which, as Daniel says, we will be recording in the next little while. But thanks for listening to this, and stick around, because we're not finished. We are still here, and hopefully coming back. So there you go.